Hey guys, this is Koba speaking. Thanks for watching again. I've finally got back to this one. Everyone on my YouTube channel has been asking numerous times on when I will be continuing with part 2, or rather part 3 of this particular series of modeling for low poly game assets, and I finally have some free time. It's been almost 2 years now, so I am making a dedicated time to try and finish this series, and I'm going to finish up the texturing, the modeling, the sculpting, all of this for you guys. I have some free time, and I would like to thank everyone for watching my videos and for being so dedicated to my channel, and I'm really appreciative of that. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to quickly look at here is that some of these assets that I made previously are still very low poly. They don't have any form of beveled edges, and these could definitely be adjusted to kind of have that slight beveled corner to make it appear more detailed, especially when you're viewing from a distance. We have to always keep in mind when we're making these models that they will be viewed from probably around about maybe there in screen space resolution. So keeping that in mind, we always have to make sure that we can get as much detail out of the model from that small little size perspective or aspect. So in terms of that, I'd like to go through a lot of these assets and actually adjust some of the details on them. So first of all, let's get started with this guy. I'll put a frame on that. I am using 2016 now, and in 2016 we have a few shortcuts that I will mention throughout the video, and we'll continue talking about them as we go along. The first thing is going to be the shortcut for isolating a particular object. As we know, in the old Maya it used to be this little icon for isolating an object. Now we can hit Control-1 to isolate that guy. So I'm going to hit that, and if we want to go back we can just hit Control-1 again if you want to get back to everything. Right, so the first thing, I'm going to right click on this guy, I'm going to go to the edges mode, and I'm going to select all the borders of my model. Select that, and I'm going to bevel the corners. Now I don't want to bevel any of the internal edges as they do not need additional detail. You just have to keep that in mind. So right, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to hold down Shift, right click, and then the marking menu will pop up, and I'm going to choose bevel edge, and that's going to give me a nice beveled corner. Yes, there is some triangles happening here, which I'm fine with. Ooh, and we just had a crash. Let me get back to you. So as I was saying, once you've added the bevels, you'll see that the bevel has one segment. We're ending up with a little triangle corner over here, which is completely acceptable, especially for the gaming workflow. At the end of the day, you're trying to reduce the poly count as much as possible, and for the most part, triangles tend to give you a better deformation with the less amount of polygons. So we can go into the fractions, and maybe holding down Control and clicking on this little slider, we can control the tightness of the edge. And we have to keep in mind this will be viewed from that aspect. So having that so far away, it needs to hold that detail, and if you can't see that corner, then it's probably a good idea to go back into the inputs for your last action or last tool and kind of adjust that accordingly. Let's say 0.04 maybe. Oops, that's not what I want. 0.4, there we go. And that feels a little bit better, especially around these corners. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to lead forwards and repeat the same process for all of these, and I'll do this off screen. I'll be back just now. So as I was working on this, I was thinking of a quick way of repeating the same process with the same values from one object to another. And in the Maya 2016 and versions up, they've added the new features of copying certain attributes So we can either highlight them, the ones that we want to copy. We can add some extra attributes if you want to this short list. And so all I'm looking for here is just the copy attribute. So I'm going to click on that, and then that's going to give me the exact values that I would like to copy. So I'm going to hit 0.4, press enter, right click, or just click on that little drop down menu, copy, and when I go to this object and I repeat the same process, just quickly selecting all the corner sides at the bottom, and then at the top over here I'm going to hold down shift right click, bevel, and I'm going to hit paste, and that should copy those values over for us. I know it was just a single attribute, I could have just type in the value, but when you're editing a few of these attributes at the same time, that option becomes extremely useful for multiple objects. Right, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to quickly save, Control S, and then we will Control 1 again to unisolate that, and we can definitely see that this object feels a lot more refined and feels more detailed compared to the rest of the objects. So this process is quite repetitive. I don't see the point in running through every little object one at a time with you guys, having to listen to my voice repeating the same thing over. So I'm going to quickly go and edit all of these. I'll be back just now. Right, so I have done one of these objects, and it's quite a tedious process to try and isolate only the corner edges and then these over here. So I found another little trick that is definitely worth mentioning that's going to help the process or speed up the process quite a bit. So I'm going to quickly undo this on this object, and then I'm going to run through that, showing you guys exactly what I've done. So isolate. I'm going to immediately just apply a bevel to this object as is. So shift right click, and then let's see if the bevel feature is here. No, it's not. Okay, so instead of that, we can go to the modeling toolkit. We can go to mesh tools, and we can edit mesh, and then bevel, and that's going to bevel all the edges, including the ones on the inner section. And we definitely don't want to be beveling these guys, but I don't want to go painstakingly run through all these edges and select them. So instead, beveling all of them, and then we can collapse only the inner edge rings that we have here. So I'm going to select the first edge, obviously go into edge mode, select the first edge, shift double click on that, and rinse and repeat the same process for all of these corners, and that will allow us to quickly select the ring loop going around the object, as we can see. And then what we can do is we can hold down shift right click, merge, and collapse edges, and then we can say collapse edges, and that will go and center the merging of those two edges to a single edge, and they will be back to where they used to be. And this way it speeds up the process for beveling these without the issue of running through all of them. So if you find this workflow to be quicker than the other one, by all means go ahead and use this one. Okay, so I'm back. I've tweaked a few of these. I've added the same effect to the base supports on all sides. And the next thing that I want to quickly address is that a lot of times, I think I've mentioned this in the first video when I did these top planks, a lot of times you're going to have these repetitious kind of effects like these planks, and you definitely want to have these guys with some sort of a difference in width and height and thickness and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split these guys up. There's multiple ways of doing so. You can either use the modeling toolkit using the connect tool, and then you can by selecting the edge, clicking on the connect, and then the middle mouse drag button will give you the ability to add subdivisions. And then once you've repeated that to all of them, you can then go and tweak each corner independently, just to give it some bit of randomness and adjusting the profile. Right, so another way to cut this is to use the multi-cut tool, and then clicking on that, it will automatically put the object into component mode. And then if you hold down control, you can then insert your edge loops wherever you prefer. The other option is to actually say you want to set up the subdivisions accordingly. Let me just undo these guys. You can turn on subdivisions and then like turn on 2 or 3. And what this will do for you is actually add 3 sections or 3 subdivisions for where it's splitting this model, and then you can use those components internally to do whatever you want, like cutting the faces manually across the object like I'm doing right now. So another way to do this is to use the old classic insert edge loop tool, which is a 2013 and below feature. For those of you that's using that, this will make a lot more sense. So insert edge loop, this looks very similar. It does not use the multicut. It's basically like the multicut tool, and then wherever you click and drag, it's going to give you the same cuts. The nice thing about the old way of working is it has a feature that is called multi-edge loop, and then you can choose the number of edges the way you want to cut. And when you click, it will place perfect even cuts across the model, just like what the connect tool does. So there's different ways that you can use this. It just means that whenever you're using a different version of Maya, then those features might become more useful to you. Right, so I'm going to spend a bit of time tweaking some of these planks, giving them some variation, some breakup and so on, and then I will be back. Right, so now that I've split these guys up and added some adjustments and tweaks, I now want to address some of the thickness issues. Most of these guys are pretty much even in thickness and depth, and I feel like that's too uniform, especially looking from over here. We can't really see that they have some variation. So in that case, what I'm going to do is just quickly switch to component mode, and we're going to select the faces of one of these guys, and I will be adjusting their thicknesses according to my likeness. And the only thing that I'm doing is selecting one face, holding down shift, and then double clicking, and that will only select the loop up to the point of the face that was selected previously. And I'm just going to rinse and repeat the same process, and maybe some of these have a little bit thickness in the center, and vice versa for these guys. Right, there we go, it's looking pretty good. Now we've got some thickness variation, which I like quite a bit, and what I do feel like we might want to kind of pull out some of these to look like they're bowing outwards, like the pressure of the roof is kind of bending them in that direction. Same thing goes for these guys, maybe pulling them inwards, just kind of reveal some of this stuff on the inside. And I'm going to repeat that over here as well, lifting these guys maybe a little bit more, and maybe pull that one back in like that. Right, now we're getting quite a bit of variation. I'm going to spend some time just doing that whole bevel thing as I was doing previously, and then we can look at seeing how we can add a little bit more variation, like keeping these planks together instead of just, you know, stacking them straight up, maybe having some support beams going across. Yes, we are going a little bit off of the original concept, which I will quickly bring up for you guys. I'm going to say image, import image, grab my reference, bring it into view, and then adjusting my size over here and moving it to the corner. So offset and offset. There we go. So if you guys remember, we did this one at the bottom, and so I can't really see what's happening at the back, so it's completely open for interpretation of our choice. I do feel like I like this cross beams and supports over here. This is really a nice kind of layout, and I think that could, you know, help a lot with the design itself. So let's get to it. Okay, so I'm back. I've done the bevels. I do feel, however, looking at these, they're still feeling like a perfect straight line going down. So I do feel like maybe you need to, you know, use maybe some sort of a rotation just to offset these guys to make them feel like they've been kind of wedged in between each other to keep them upright, and that might give us a little bit of an extra space to add a much thinner plank in between. So I'm going to be moving these guys off and around just to see if we can get some variation happening. I'm already liking this a lot more. It's feeling a lot more balanced and interesting. So I'm going to grab one of these guys, just duplicate it, kind of move it into position, and then kind of rotate this one up. And what I'm going to do is actually make use of my deform and then use a lattice tool. So lattice is really useful. It's basically an FFD modifier for those max users. And I'm going to reduce the count of these the T subdivs down to 0, and then I'm going to hit F. I'm going to hit F9 for the lattice, or another way is just obviously going into component mode over here, or another way is, and just see, right click lattice, there we go. Now we're in component mode for the lattice, which allows us to then grab the components of the lattice and then squeeze and deform these guys to our liking. Hold this in like that. It's feeling pretty cool. I'm liking this quite a bit. Hold this one in more. And same thing applies to these at the bottom. Something like that. If I'm happy with it, I can then go and select my internal object and clear its history by holding down Shift, Alt, and D. And then if you still want to adjust some of these things, then you're completely allowed to do so. That kind of feels interesting. Maybe this one here at the top we can bring down and then bring this across there. That feels nice. And then same thing applies to this one. Right. Yes, it is definitely a weird looking plank. It's broken up, but that's kind of the idea. We want to have some parts look like they're just about to fall out, and for that case it will make the whole design feel a more vibrant and interesting shape. So I'm going to pull this out, make it more bending outwards to give it more an interesting kind of feeling, and I'm going to leave it like that. I'm happy with that for now. Right, so let's address the cross beams, and I'm going to grab one of these that's more even. I can even grab one of these that's pretty much not being affected at all, and duplicate that. These still have the original rotation, so I'm just going to go and zero that out, and it doesn't seem like it kept the, oh yes, zero that one out as well. There we go. Pull this across, pull this down, and line it up more or less. I'm going to go to my rotational tool, and then I'm going to hold down J for snapping. So if you look in the tool settings, if you turn that on, it turns on an absolute 15-degree snap, and if you rotate that enough, you'll get to a minus 90 degrees, and we can then pull this in, line these up like that, and I'm going to go and make these much thinner. I do feel, however, that this plank is way too thick, especially looking at some of the others. I don't want this to feel like a massive beam, supporting beam. These are just planks kind of holding up the structure. So if I go into component mode, we can stretch this out. And I'm doing this in a component mode because I don't want to use the scale and then stretch this out non-uniformly and then ending up with these awkward long edges, and this still maintaining itself. So that's why I'm doing it in component mode. The other thing that I'm doing is changing my axis orientation for my transform tool to object instead of world, because object looks at the object's rotation and then maintains that arrow direction accordingly, and that is very useful for maintaining the proportions and directionality of the object. So these I do feel, however, we need splits in between, so I'm going to go to the modeling toolkit, connect, and then we can hit enter, and that's going to split it up, and that way we can then use the components to make some adjustments accordingly, just to give it some interesting variation. So I feel like this one is working for me. I do, however, feel that our width of the bevel is now too wide, and it's making this plane feel a little bit too kind of squashed almost. So I'm going to loop select the faces going around, and then we can use a normal mode. So normal orientation axes is only usable in component mode in actual vertex component mode, and none of the others. So what this allows us to do is actually, let me go back out again, and then instead of just right clicking go to vertex mode, we can actually convert the selection into vertex mode, and that you can do using control, and whichever component mode you want to convert the current selection to, you're going to press that F key combination on the keyboard. So we know that F9 is supposed to be the key combination for component vertex mode, and F10 is for edges, and F11 for faces. It's currently a face mode, so we can then hit Control F9, and that should convert the current selection into vertex. And then I'm going to use the normal orientation, and then use the N direction to pull the faces inwards to make them more narrower. Another way to do that is you could use, I guess, face mode and kind of squeeze it, but you can see how it deforms it in a non-proportionate way, so that's definitely something that I don't want. However, I do feel like I need to squeeze it out this way as well, just to maintain that width all the way around, and that feels a lot better. Perfect. So let's do further adjustments, like grabbing these guys and maybe switching back to object mode, and then I'm using these planar control handles from our transform tool to maintain it moving this direction and that direction, but not in depth. So that's quite useful as well. Right, so I think I'm quite happy with that. A little bit up more, there we go. And I'm going to move this one up a lot, and I think that one kind of works really nice, especially for holding back those planks over there. And then I'm going to duplicate it, move it down, and maybe have this one rest a little bit longer, moving this across, maybe rotating this way, having it rest on this beam over here. Cool. I am then going to do a few smaller adjustments, as I don't want these to penetrate too much. I'm just going to use the edges, the vertices, and pulling them out so that they're just about sitting on that curvature. I think I'm happy with that for now. Same thing with this one. We want to make sure we don't penetrate them too much. Pulling them out, and that should be pretty good. Right, I think holding this current shape, I think it's going to look good once we have some textures on it. I'm going to keep repeating the same process with the stronger supporting beams over here at the back, and we don't really have any reference as to what's happening underneath this. There's a roofing, but just keep going with that. I'm going to select the edges. I'm going to go to edge mode, loop select that. I'm going to hit the bevel tool over here and change the values accordingly. I'm going to say, let's look at the other one. So that's about 0.2 maybe. 2. Yes, that looks pretty good. Excellent. I'm pretty happy with that. I think I might even want to copy this guy over, move it to this side, and we can put something on that later if we feel like it. Right. I'm going to keep repeating the same process, tweaking some of these planks just like what we've done here at the back, and once we're back I can show you guys what I've done. Right, so I've finished up these guys and I've added some custom shapes to them. However, I didn't make them any thicker or thinner at all, which we can quickly do. I'm going to select the faces over here. I'm going to grow the selection holding down shift and then full stop, and then we can squeeze these guys in a little bit to make them thinner to our liking. Right, same thing over here, and we're selecting these guys over here, grow the selection and then making that thinner right there. Let's have a look. Can't go too far, especially that this one seems to have a bit of an extra edge, which one was never supposed to be there in the first place. So let's do that one more time, and I might have beveled that one a little bit too far. That's what's been pushing it out in such a strange way. Here we go, that's a lot better. Yes, now that feels much nicer. You do, however, have to keep in mind that we will be viewing it from this distance, so if you make it too thin, it's going to look odd. Right, so then what I've done, I've repeated the same process for these internal planks, and I'm going to quickly select these guys. Just run through them, select, Control 1. You can see I've same width more or less. I didn't add any adjustments to some of these at the back. They do have a bit of a space in between, which is quite nice, but I try to keep them mostly aligned like this, as this is supposed to be the main base platform for where everything will be put on top of. If you have too many variations, you have to rotate a lot of these objects. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to artistic requirements or whatever you feel like. So you might want to say, you know what, I do feel like some of these need more space. By all means, keep doing that. However, I would like to mention that you want to try and find certain repetitive patterns that you could easily use without making all of these so completely unique that you have to end up sculpting or texturing each one independently. If you do feel like you want to have that, then by all means you can do that. But you also have to keep in mind, the more work you add for yourself, the more textures you'll have, and obviously more resources that will be used at render time or within the gaming engine as it draws out the actual shapes on screen. Okay, so I'm going to pull back again, have a look at the rest of the object. Might want to make some of these more buckled and bent in. So again, I'm going to tweak them and then come